This is an introduction to week 8. For our spiritual practice this week, I've chosen, as I went down to the river to pray, a traditional American song, variously described as a Christian folk hymn, an African American spiritual, an Appalachian song, and a Southern gospel song. The exact origin of the song is unknown, although when I did a little research about it, there is some suggestion that it was composed by an enslaved person. I've provided a link to Alison Krauss singing it. Let the music wash over you. Sing along if you want to, and maybe even take a shower or wash your hands as one way to remember and claim anew your baptismal vows in this week when we're talking about classic rituals. All Christian traditions share two rituals, baptism and communion or Eucharist. The Catholic stream of Christianity adds 5 additional rituals: confirmation, ordination, marriage, reconciliation, formerly known as confession, and the anointing of the sick. The Orthodox stream of Christianity includes the same additional rituals as the Catholic stream, but names 3 of them differently: chrismation for confirmation, holy orders for ordination, and penance for reconciliation. While Protestant streams of Christianity have always celebrated baptism and communion, some have also adopted and adapted several rituals from the Catholic and Orthodox streams. Along with baptism and communion, it's these rituals or their adaptations that I call classic rituals. This allows me to distinguish ritual actions with deep roots in the Christian tradition from more contemporary or occasional new rituals that leaders develop for specific situations. We'll pick up new rituals next week. In this week's reading from Ramshaw, we zero in on baptism, which Ramshaw suggests is the ritual that deserves this treatment since it's what initiates believers into Christian community. One interesting thing to ponder as you read her chapter this week: historically, as I mentioned earlier in the class, baptism and communion have been linked, so this chapter circles back to a forum conversation earlier in the course about the strengths and weaknesses of open and closed communion, defined by various authors in various ways. In addition to the chapter from Ramshaw, you'll be reading several pages from the Worship Leaders edition of Voices Together, focused on 4 classic rituals: 1 chapter from Susan Smith's book, Caring Liturgies, and 1 online resource, the Calvin Institute of Worship's webpage on trauma-informed worship. I'm including this last reading because rituals, as we noticed in the communion forum, can sometimes be traumatizing, as can worship in general. Part of our job as worship planners and leaders is to plan and lead in trauma-informed ways. My mini-lecture looks at the difference between rituals and ceremonies, 2 terms that are often and incorrectly used interchangeably, as well as a framework for evaluating whether a ritual is effective or failed. I'm also including a screencast on focus in worship to encourage you to narrow what you're trying to do, both in your chapel and in its individual components. 1 worship resource, 1 worship service does not need to do everything. My baseline in worship planning and leading is to do no harm and to avoid doing things that will later need to be undone. I also trust that I and others don't have to do everything every time. There will be other worship services and other rituals and other chances to work with a particular biblical text. Your main assignment this week is to create a script for the classic ritual that most closely fits your Making 4 Hours Count 2 text. Look in the detailed assignments folder for the classic ritual assignment and read the description and directions carefully. In creating your classic ritual script, you'll start with one of the 4 rituals: baptism, communion, healing or anointing, and commissioning of leaders, that are listed in VT, and give it the inflection or coloration of your Making 4 Hours Count 2 text. Thus, your classic ritual, rather than being generic, should recognizably fit the biblical text that is the focus of your chapel service or your final project if you aren't doing it in chapel. While it's quite possible that you are experienced at performing classic rituals, the point of writing one out is to slow you down so that you notice and pay attention to what you're doing and alternate choices you might make. Writing things down is also helpful to those who have never performed a ritual before. It gives them a chance to think through the logistics of the ritual. Finally, having a script puts us literally on the same page, which makes a specific conversation and assessment possible. You'll submit your final draft of your classic ritual by 8:30 a.m. EST on Tuesday. The forum post this week is again a real question and answer forum, so start drafting your ritual script early enough in the week that you'll have a question to post by 8:30 a.m. on Friday. You'll respond to your colleagues by 8:30 a.m. on Sunday. In the event that you would like real-time connection with people in the class, arrange to meet 2 other classmates in a Google Hangout or a phone call and do your forum work conversationally. If you go this route, make sure to have one person in your group make a post in the forum by 8:30 a.m. Sunday. The post will record who was in the group. For example, Miriam, Amos, and Obadiah met by phone on the 5th of Never to discuss our draft of the fishing ritual, and the gist of your conversation. Miriam had questions about fish hooks and children. Amos raised the issue of whether catching fish was ethical, and Obadiah asked us to help him think through whether it was possible to perform this ritual on the AMBS campus, where we have neither a river, a stream, or a lake, etc. One last thing. This is the week for a group mid-semester check-in. I've linked a reminder of the sign-up sheet directly below the Zoom link for our Wednesday evening conversation. There are still some open slots for those of you who haven't signed up to join an already existing group or begin another one. I'll be lounging in the Zoom room all evening, ready to talk to you when you arrive.